45,000 dock workers across the nation are going on strike in multiple ports. And if you're thinking that, hey, this is not going to affect me, oh, it will. And in this video, we're going to go over how. So first, let's go over the problem, right? So there's 45,000 dock workers are set to go on strike. So 40% of imports come through these docks. Now, let's look at exactly with some more numbers what happens. Well, when dock workers strike, $2 billion in goods could be delayed per day. $2 billion worth of shipping, right? And now you're like, it's just dock workers. Well, not really, because truckers deliver these goods from ports to their distribution centers. And that impact is $800 billion in trucking that's going to be halted because all these trucking and all these are so connected. This trucking, the dock workers, and the warehouses are so connected. And yeah, and now the warehouses slow down. 1.9 million warehouse workers could be affected due to reduced workload. And so if you're working at a warehouse and they might furlough you or say, hey, at the moment we just don't have the work because nothing's coming in. And now, if this happens in the United States, the global supply chain is going to be disrupted. And you're like, why does that matter? Because when these ships are coming from China, coming from overseas, and they're not being offloaded and they're still fully loaded, they need to be just sitting outside in the port and just waiting for their offload date. So now, or till they can actually get offload. So now let's look at what these workers are demanding. The workers are demanding a 10 to 15% wage increase. The current average pay is about $35 an hour, but the rising costs of living pushes them to demand more. And wage increase could add up to an additional $300 million annually in shipping costs. So then it's going to cost you way, way more. So now I got a video explaining it from the news media. Let's watch it.
Biden administration officials are urging the dock workers union and the shipping industry to return to the negotiating table ahead of a looming strike. If the union does walk out at midnight on Tuesday, the impact on the U.S. economy could be catastrophic. Here's ABC's Rena Roy.
Tonight, 45,000 dock workers on the East and Gulf Coasts are preparing to walk off the job, and it could be devastating for the U.S. economy. 14 ports from New England to Texas could shut down Tuesday at midnight. Up to 36 could be affected. Those crucial hubs responsible for nearly 35% of all U.S. imports and exports.
When my men hit the streets, from Maine to Texas, every single port will lock down.
The International Longshoremen's Association demanding higher hourly wages in their new contract and a ban on automated cranes, gates, and trucks. A prolonged strike could mean delayed shipping and higher prices for Americans on things like clothes, electronics, cars, and food like canned goods and fresh produce. The U.S. economy would take a direct hit.
It's estimated that a strike would cost somewhere around $5 billion a day.
The U.S. Maritime Alliance, representing the shippers and ports, says it's committed to negotiating, but claims the union is not bargaining in good faith. The Biden administration urging both sides to negotiate fairly and quickly.
Both sides have got to settle the strike. Support the collective bargaining effort. I think they'll settle the strike.
Now, according to a senior White House official, Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg.
So they sent President Biden out telling him, hey, you gotta clean up and go and do this. And we're gonna see. And when Biden and the transportation people go out there, then you know that these unions have a huge, huge power. So let's see a solution that they could reach or that I see. Ongoing talks between unions and management could prevent a $10 billion loss in the economy if resolved quickly. So you got to resolve it. And how do you do that? Well, you just pay them their fair wage and you not make more automations and be like, okay, with those cranes that we got going on, that's all right, but we'll retrain you and you do other things at the port and the docks and see what happens. Because government intervention possible if resolution isn't reached within 30 days. So then the government's going to step in. I don't know what they're going to do. Yeah, we'll figure that one out. And past strikes have costed up to 1 billion per day in economic losses. And now you're like, that doesn't affect me at all because I work in medical, in the med field, I work in tech, I do remote work. Doesn't affect me. So hold on, here it comes. The late shipping of electronic clothing and cars prices could increase 5 to 10%. So there you go, another 5 to 10% increase in goods. Businesses may face a 20% increase in shipping costs due to delays. It's like, oh man, you want to send something out? There you go, 20% more. Layoffs possible for the 3.5 million truckers and 1.9 million warehouse workers. So great, we're going to add more fuel to the fire with these layoffs. Impact on inflation, high prices across the board. And when we're looking at all of these things, and it basically comes down to money and automation. And once again, we're at a spot where everything needs to be automated. We're at a spot now where you can have these cranes from these dock workers run 24/7 and just outdo what humans do. Like the human output's gonna be gone. So when you're thinking about it, like, they can run these cranes 24/7 with AI, like Amazon warehouses, where they just have everything with these robots, and then you don't need these dock workers anymore. So they said, well, enough is enough. We still need jobs. We need to feed our families somehow, and it's done. And so they use their leverage power. And actually, kudos to them to do it now before it's too late. Because when they're starting implementing all these innovations, they're implementing all of these crazy new automations, and then you're like, oh, they slowly phase people out. You need to do it now and make sure that all of this stuff is cut off. And you're like, hey, we renegotiate a contract for foreseeable future. But even if they do, and even if they do negotiate a new contract and they figure it out by Tuesday night, there's still going to be huge impacts because people now, these unions, they're still going to get laid off, even though they might ease the pain a little bit with saying, hey, we're not going to do innovation and we're going to stop automation. It's just going to be slower. Instead of like 10 years, it's probably going to be 8. So they bought themselves some time, but what's on the horizon is coming. And now we're just going to have to wait to see what's going to happen. Because all this stuff that we buy from Target, Walmart, is coming mostly from other parts of the world because we're a global economy. So chips and manufacturing is coming from different places. When you look at these chip manufacturers from NVIDIA, they come from Taiwan, they come from different places all over the globe. And then if it's sensitive to the United States, then they'll assemble it here. But there's products that come from all over the globe to the US ports, then they get trucked. And because we don't do everything in the United States. So then now you're like, oh gosh. So pants that come from Taiwan or wherever they come from on the label or Vietnam are going to be held up at these ports, right? So when you're going to have these ports being clogged up and not being offloaded, that's going to cost the shipping industry big time because all these big ships cost money to run too. And if they're not being offloaded, they're just going to idle. And idling is really bad for pollution, one thing, and it's going to cost all these people because they still need the captain aboard, they still need to have everything running. And then there are perishable goods. They have these containers that are perishable. And then they're going to go bad because they're not being offloaded. So then either you find a port that does offload, or you just say, we're just not going to do it. And it is always around election time where all this stuff comes to play. And now, I bet you these government agencies are looking for the transportation agencies are trying to prevent the crisis, because if that's going to happen and a lot more people are going to lose their jobs because of it, they're not going to be happy going into the midterm elections. no, not midterm, the presidential elections. These people are not going to be happy of going into the presidential election, and they're going to voice their concerns. And now we're going to see what is going to happen, but it's going to cost the American consumer big time. Like always, we are always the one that have to pay up, even though it wasn't us, and we wanted to pay these people more because we want them to live a decent and good quality of life. It ain't happening. It ain't happening. These people are just, these unions are just gonna say, hey, we need more money. And these ports are like, nah, can't do it. Can't do it. So then they're gonna go on strike. And then they're saying, we have government options on the table. And I wonder, what are they even talking about with government options on the table? You're gonna force these people to do work, or you're gonna get the engineering, the military corps to start offloading these containers? The Army Corps of Engineers to start offloading these containers? That'd be socialism, or whatever you want to call it, or communism, or whatever it is, when the government starts to step in and say, hey, we're gonna start taking over the ports and we're gonna start offloading. It's like, oh boy. Yeah, I really, really wish that this didn't happen, but hey, it's good now because presidential elections are right around the corner. And that's gonna be a deciding factor, I bet you, for all these people that are in the dock industry of unloading boats and doing all that. That's gonna be really, really interesting. And when I'm looking at all of these nuances, all of these economic trends, it's really looking like this is all not going in the right way. Even though we lowered interest rates a little bit, and people said we're gonna have hyperinflation coming up. Well, hyperinflation hasn't even. I've seen price reductions. I've seen small price reductions at stores because they just can't sell their goods because nobody has money. So yeah, I'm curious to hear, do you still have money? Do you still go out and shop and do things like you did before? Because I don't think so. I think we all changed our spending pattern and said, hey, if it's not a necessity, we ain't doing it. And yeah, it's just not worth taking the risk because no jobs are guaranteed. And if you do think, you're like, I'll have a union, have all this stuff. Nah, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because even with a union, we'll see how long your union's gonna hold up and how long your union's gonna protect you, because your union is also gonna figure something out. And your union, somebody brought up a good point that they said the union works for the company. In some sort of way they do, because that's how they get paid. They get paid a percentage of your paycheck, which your union dues. That's what your union dues are. And I'm not going to open up that can of worm of what the union dues, what, if they're well spent or whatnot, because that is a road I do not want to go down. But it is absolutely bananas when I'm looking at all these things that are on the horizon and I'm seeing hurricane, devastating. Then I see these dock workers. And then I'm looking at it like, how is this great to look into the future? What else is coming down the pipeline that I haven't even seen yet? But it is not looking the way I wish it would happen. I'm not seeing people, hey, we're going to hire 20,000 US workers. We're going to open up a manufacturing plant and open up 10,000 workers or something like it. No, all I read is layoffs, unions going to first stop working, and a whole bunch of other stuff like devastation on that hurricane that just happened. And now we're looking at people in that area that got hit by that hurricane are saying, oh, they didn't renew my insurance because they wanted to wait, and so I couldn't renew. So all these factors play a role into what you pay for goods, because you are, so let me rephrase this. So if you're a worker from, if you're an insurance company and you now got to rebuild these cities or rebuild that, I tell you one thing where the money's not going to come from your profits. And I know these insurance companies have reassurance and all these other things, but what they're going to do is they're going to hire lawyers to figure out how to not pay. That's just how the game works. And then they're like, oh, they're going to spread the risk across multiple states. Yeah, they do. They do spread the risk across multiple states, but they're not going to increase it by so much in one state to subsidize another state, because that doesn't make economical sense. They're going to increase it in that area where there's the most amount of damage done and pull out, because they still need to run a profit in that state at the end of the day. You can't just offer insurance and say, you know what, Florida is going to be a loss leader for us and every other state is going to be profitable for us, and we're just going to offer it and subsidize everybody. That is not how business works. Business works that you run a profit in every industry, in every sector, in every county, in every city, in every state, because you need to make profits. Even if you're State Farm or Geico or whatever you want to call it, you need to run a profit. And so what do? You just increase the rates, or you say, you know, our models, because they all do these crazy AI models, say, with these models, we're going to say we can't do it. It's showing us it's too risky to do it, and it's too risky to underwrite it, so we're going to be done. And we're going to pull out. They do that with car insurance. If you had a few accidents and you're like, hey, I want to get another car insurance, they say you're too risky of a borrower or you're too risky of a driver, we're not going to underwrite you. And then either you're going to pay such a high premium or they're just not going to take you. And the same is going to go with homeowners insurance. They still need to make a profit, and they can't. And I'm telling you this all the time. They cannot. Insurance cannot pay you to rebuild your house every 2 years. It just doesn't make economical sense. And so is it with these dock workers. They need to get paid their fair value, or they're just not going to do it. And then it's either going to be all AI, or you're going to walk off the job and see what happens. So it's a really interesting thing. We're in really interesting times. Let me know what you think about all this, and we will see you in the next one. If you haven't, please like and subscribe. Shoot me an email if you want me to cover a topic. And I appreciate you guys. Thanks so much.